the outside. And actually, we were thinking that either you dissolve the region to do it, or we recruit people from the neutrinos to do it. But I think it has to be much bigger. We have had such successful tables, and only the tables, book tables, with, I don't know, 800 euro as well. I think this will be the way to do it, and I think it has to be organized from the top, and not from the regions.
Mm-hmm. Well, probably you've got a real situation.
One question in connection, one question, because what erupted also right now. You mentioned before in one of your statements about these good meetings end of 70s, 80s. There was everyday meetings, there was discussion, you described it.
Yeah.
And in this period also was if you look to our writings, if you look to your writings, was a renaissance process of thinking, of learning, and this is all intervening in the history. And we are sitting now together after the last meeting was 2 years ago. If you look, for example, to Büsow, the last meeting of the Büsow Vorstand was 2.5 years ago. Now, there is no talking to each other anymore. And I come back to what Elisabeth also mentioned with the unifying process. I think that is the problem. It's not a question of to be engaged, to have this mission. The problem is that people, it seems, cannot work together anymore, or some people take the trust away from people, people resignate on other people, and because of this there's no talking anymore, and you get an explanation, in the Renaissance period it was also not everything golden, now therefore we must live also with this. That is my question, how we can get meetings again, because the telephone, as you explained, is also not helping. Now, therefore, because we have to sit together like today.
But it's all
and to have a discussion, and to have also, because the operations bulletins is also not helping, because they are, if you look to the language of we have to think about how to improve it, that you get information what is going on in the population. Not to do report, we're doing everything good in the outreach force today, and this and this and this. We have to think to make the intelligence and the discussion, and to also to establish some kinds of institutionalized meeting where in Wiesbaden to do it, and to have this also reported, and the news and the other organization, that everybody knows something, and not only if you talk by chance to some person to know something.
Very simple. I did it. And it demonstrates exactly how it works. I had generally the leadership of the organization in the U.S. is pretty much moribund, almost dying, incompetent by habits acquired, especially over the course of the 1990s. When I got off paper, I began to move, because now I could talk to all the members. I couldn't talk to the members before. And one of the first things was Fernando went as a result of that. So I moved, and I moved over strong opposition from within the leadership. Efforts were made to sabotage things. They had a corrupted operation in terms of financially was corrupted by the way Ed and others organized the finances for my campaign, the 2000 campaign. And they had this crazy scheme. I said, shut it down. They said, no, we won't shut it down. I said, okay, jail, 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 jail. You shut it down. And you shut it down. Yeah. Because what they were doing was wrong. Morally, legally wrong. And it was done behind my back. And the policy was in that direction. I started a campaign in 2001. You know what happened at the end of 2000. In the beginning of 2001, I laid down diagnosis on the Bush administration before it was in. I said, look for incompetence. The economy is already collapsing. This is an incompetent administration. It cannot be cured. And we have to expect something like Helen Goering setting fire to the Reichstag to happen fairly soon. And it happened. called 9/11. And we got more and more influence. And began the enemies working against us. In my 2004 campaign, they tried to sabotage it. It was tried to sabotage by the leadership of the organization in Leesburg, the majority of it. Operations around the printing operation were corrupt, illegal. I had to shut them down by force, stop them by force, over strong whining and objections from most of the leadership. We rammed through the operation we ran in Boston in July of 2004. Nancy Spanis and others conspired to try to stop it. They couldn't stop it because it was my campaign and I had the authority, and I rammed it through over their objections, and it was screaming. What we did there with over 100 youth in Boston, in my deployment up there, we changed history. Just a little over 100 youth and a rest of the staff up in Boston. We changed history. As a result of that, I was put into an advisory position in running the Kerry campaign. Then after the election, in November, we had this conference, and I set down a policy which was adopted by the Democratic Party, which resulted in turning Bush into a lame duck during 2005. During 2005, my influence was the strongest single outside influence in terms of Congress, in terms of the government, in terms of what was going on there. This was done over resistance, strong, foot-dragging resistance, and outright stupidity of people who refused to learn. When I warned them not to do something, they did it because they were stupid. And I had to save some people from going to prison by their own actions because they continued to be stupid and wouldn't listen. As a result of that today, where do we stand? We're in a key position to determine whether civilization survives or not. And this was done against overcoming resistance. And the resistance here is a little stronger. The organization is weaker, but the resistance is relatively stronger. It's going to take tougher means to get this problem solved. You're going to have to make a breakthrough. You are going to Berlin. If you want to survive, you're going to Berlin. You're going to build up the Berlin operation. And the way you're going to earn money is not to worry about getting money, worry about earning it. Getting money and earning it are not always the same thing. And if you don't earn it, you may find you get trouble getting it. Now earn money. Earn your money. Don't just try to get it. Build up the Berlin operation. Build up 3 or 4 functions there. Concentrate on raising the money to get the pamphlet distribution. You have to put these things on the ticket. Now what you have to do is you have to take a U.S. orientation to Berlin. You have an incompetent government, and it's not going to get any more competent in Berlin now. The crisis is going to become worse. Berlin itself is a crisis. Therefore, what is going to happen in Berlin is the most important thing to Germany of all Germans. If you want to be important to anyone in Germany, you have to be in Berlin. Because if you're not running an election campaign with strong force in Berlin, you're not going to do a damn thing for Germany. And then why are you asking people to support you? You have to earn your income, not just get it. It's time to talk about getting money, it's fine. But earning it is a little more difficult. And if you are important to Germans, because you're doing something in Berlin which breaks the monotony and gives the kind of message out there they can't ignore, then you are going to have support. And if you get support, you're going to have money. Maybe not overflowing with money, but you'll get enough money to do the job. We've done that. Look, we had to fight. I had to fight the whole organization. We had to kick them in the United States. Kick and kick and kick and kick. We made a breakthrough. So I come here and I say, okay, buddy, we made a breakthrough in the United States. Now your turn. You do it. And don't block. And don't resist. And don't say we're already succeeding. You're already failing. Don't do that. Because you're on the road to doom. And if you're successfully proceeding along that road, you're headed toward doom, and that is not success. If you want to be treated seriously by the German population, be in Berlin, be a part of a major youth campaign around the Mayo team, get the literature out, and have the intelligence, the quality of political strategic intelligence, which is not talking about Berlin, except as the capital of Germany. It's talking about Berlin in terms of its key role in a Eurasian development program in which the United States is a key partner. Here's what's happening in the United States. Here's what must happen in Berlin, because the future of Europe depends upon a Eurasian development program which is impossible without the initiative of the United States. Everyone in Asia with any brains will tend to agree, even with differences in their interpretation. For example, India wants hundreds of thorium-powered nuclear reactors. Now, to get it, it needs a fast breeder reactor to energize the thorium cycle. Now, this is the Ulick type, 125 to 200 megawatts, or multiples of that, for things like higher temperature processes. China knows it needs things. It needs high technology. Where's it going to get it? We're going to stop the €1 jobs. We're going to get the machine tool cadre in Germany, the scientific machine tool cadre in Germany, which is the most effective functioning part of Western Europe. We're going to put them back to work to build a machine. In the same time, we're planning to rebuild a captured part of the automobile industry. We're going to do some engineering, and we're going to commit Europe, centered on Germany. We're going to commit it to a long-range operation of supplying 50 years of technological progress to supply the development of Asia. And we're going to have long-term treaty agreements between the Asian and European nations on the provision of a 50-year agreement, as a treaty agreement, to fund this operation.
But then, in order to do this, I think we really need to have a different approach about the Berlin campaign as a national campaign. Because, what is the majority of our activities? People are in the phone team, to the extent that there are not 3 people in the street. And who are our contacts? It's the machine tool people.
Yeah, right.
And I think we need to have a completely different approach in integrating people in this effort, because the way it is now, I mean, when I had a few meetings with Mittelstand people in the last campaign, it was a real, discovery what these people represent. Mm-hmm. They are very happy to show you, what patents they developed, what their recent breakthroughs was, how they, in a very difficult globalized economy, still managed to keep their operation. They love your writings because they do what you write about, and that's why there is a strong affinity. But other than the meetings I have made, I never hear anything from, talking, when people have meetings, they don't come back and say, I had a discussion with this Mittelstand guy, he has the following technology, this is how we could mobilize this in the general effort. People are sitting on their contacts, and it's completely, talking about not discussion. Look, in a certain sense, you should take your own nose, because, when did I find out about Seehofer? When the interview was done. Then I find out that you had several meetings with him in Tutzing over the years. The same thing with Amelia's meeting with Eckhart. Yeah, sure.
It was done on the spot, this is.
No, but when, come on. It is true, because when...
It's okay. It's nicht wahr.
It is true, because you and Hartmut came to me in the office and said, by the way, we met him already 10 years ago, or 2 years ago, and so on. what I'm saying is something else. Take Michael Fitt. Michael Fitt goes to Russia, and it's almost that Russia has been privatized by Fitt because he doesn't write reports. You don't know who he's meeting. Only some general things, we are talking people are talking in Russia, the following thing. That is not sufficient. People should feel accountable that they come and say who they met, because it's not a private affair what people are doing. I
Ich habe
firmly...
immer die Namen genannt, er selber nicht sowas. Letztes Mal habe ich einen langen Artikel geschrieben, Jonathan hat das jetzt bestätigt mit seinem Artikel über meine Einschätzung. Ich will das nicht so was zu erzählen. Die wichtigen Leute, das ist alles mitgeteilt, plus die Meetings, die stattfinden sollen.
No,
da gibt es keine geheimen Treffen und alle Namen sind dir bekannt.
That's not true.
Sicher, dann sagt man
Also,
mal einen, der nicht bekannt ist.
Ja, die kann ich nicht sagen.
All das, was der Linken gesagt in Russland
I tell you, Michel, your intelligence on Russia is not very good. I tell you how I get most of my intelligence on Russia. I don't get it from you. I get it from tens of thousands of sites on the internet, Russian internet, of people who are reading my articles and commenting on them.
Yeah,
Well, the point is, we don't have from you and your reporting any perception of actually what is happening in Russia. None. Zero. You meet a few people, but nothing.
But I hope you will speak with Rachel, and through Rachel you are getting everything. And Rachel is capability of Russian.
Oh, that's true. But without her, I got her on it because you were so incompetent. That's why. So don't tell me about this stuff. Now on the
I can tell you something on this stuff, because if you remember when you came out of prison, your first visit to a foreign country was in Russia. All the things that you tried.
That's a different story.
No.
That's a different story.
This is lebendig, what is lebendig? Lively till today. And what is reflected in the Putin speech, what is reflected in many other things I can tell you.
I know about this stuff.
I always tell this also to the relevant people. I speak with everything, with Wiesbaden.
Yes, Mr. I don't know who these relevant people are.
No, everything is said. And if you started to think that something is not coming to you, why did you...
I'm saying that what I'm getting is incompetent. That's what I'm saying.
Why did you tell me? Why didn't you call me and tell this after several years?
No, he's incompetent. Your reporting to me is incompetent.
It's not incompetent.
It is absolutely incompetent. That's why I got Rachel on the case. I said I'm getting nothing but garbage from Fitt.
But Helga said I didn't write anything, but then you get knocked down.
I got it because we got it by inference. I know how to do intelligence work. Therefore, I'm fairly good at it. Give some cheese to chew on. I can generally deal with the problem. But the problem here that Helga's referring to is this.
Yeah, then we can stop the other operation. Okay.
You just behave yourself. What we're talking about, before you interrupted, was another matter. It was about this question about the machine tool section in Germany. The problem is very simple. You get this tendency, and it's particularly notable here. People begin to say there's a division between, we want to protect this contact because we're depending on this contact as a money source. Therefore, we don't want people talking to them about things that might deny the money source, cut off the money source. We don't want to discuss other things with them. We want to say nice things to them and get the money. Now we have this problem, which is a problem which is centered as like the degree to which we depend on Switzerland, the degree to which we depend upon the Austrian borderline cases, and so forth. And you realize that what's happened is that Germany gets lost in the process in terms of the funding, because the orientation becomes a kind of thing of delivering reports to Swiss on a non-political basis. That is not a political relationship with them, which is fine in and of itself. But if that's a substitute for what we should be doing as a political organization, it's a mistake. Now what happens then, you get the question of the machine tool, the Mittelstadt. The Mittelstadt are looked at as the next thing to Swiss in Germany. Therefore, the tendency is to protect them from political contamination or alienation politically, to keep off issues that might cut off the money source. When in point of fact, if you look at the reality of the situation, this fear of this anti-political nonsense that politics is dangerous, we're just selling information, it's wrong. You can do it, there's nothing wrong with doing it. But if that is your policy that you depend upon for the existence of the organization, you're crazy. The issue here is the machine tool issue. Is the machine tool system is essentially the soul of Germany, the German economy. Now what the machine tool industry needs to know, it needs to be engaged with us on the same level that we're dealing with the machine tool industry in the United States. We should be scheming on what? Scheming as we're doing with the auto industry in the US. We should be scheming for Germany's role in Eurasia. And the role of Germany in Eurasia is the machine tool industry. Now, the way you get that is you get into a programmatic discussion, not a discussion of interesting things, but a programmatic discussion on what can we, with what particular firms, do what for this purpose. So you want a conception of feasibility, and you want to discuss with people who can tell you what they think they're capable of doing, with a mission-oriented. Not with what they can do, but a mission-oriented sense. Because what we need is this. You've got a broken country called Germany. It's ground up and chewed up. It's the only country in Europe that really, as a nation, could still function outside of Russia as a nation. None of the other parts can really function as a nation. And Europe depends upon Germany at the same time that Europe is sucking the blood of Germany. It's the Maastricht arrangement. So therefore, what you need to do is you need to say a strategic assessment of what Germany's capabilities are for doing what might be needed for what we conceive of. And I know a list of things that I'm sure we're not really discussing. Jonathan probably would discuss it with some people if he had a chance to, because he's technically qualified to do that. But what we're not discussing is this kind of thing of putting together a package of a national program which you can take again and then go talk to the friends in India, then go talk to the friends in China and so forth, as Germany, and produce a package. Now, we can't accept this idea of taking down Berlin. We can't accept it. It's not acceptable. It's not possible. The Maastricht Agreement has to be broken. The whole thing has to be broken. Otherwise, there's no Germany. If you're not out to break Maastricht, you're not German. You're something else. You belong to a different species. So this thing has to be broken. Berlin is the natural center for the deployment of the technology deployment across Eurasia. It's the historic reasons and other reasons. Therefore, what you need is a program of the type we're doing with the auto industry organization. Therefore, you should be talking to machine tool people about this. This won't alienate them. This won't jeopardize them. This will actually enhance it, that you're serious now. Now you're doing something serious.
Yeah, but one thing, honestly, I'm sitting on the phone now for 1.5 years. And there's one point I disagree with you. One single point. And that is if you call us sales representatives. I have never, I will never, I can never consider myself as a sales representative. Period. That's not my thing.
Neither am I.
Anything to
Neither am I.
What?
Neither am I.
Yeah, but so it is political. But I sometimes have to say them. I have to say things. But no, I think it is. This is what we are trying to do, and it's not. I don't know where this comes from, but at least now what I see, what I hear the friends say at the phones to people they talk to. It is simply not so that we are not, that we are a political operation or something. It is very tough, and you have to really,
but Martin, wait a second. Yeah. Look, for example, when I had meetings with, what is this, Mittelstand in Bayern, this Maasberg. When I have discussions with him, I went to his firm, he showed me his inventions and so on. then he says, we have the following problems, that, for example, the government is not doing anything to protect the Mittelstand in China. And then we have a discussion of what would be necessary to protect. I'm just mentioning it, that out of each meeting comes some valuable intelligence which we should have available in this national program. And that is never discussed.
No, that's
except when I do meetings. And I offered many times I want to do more meetings, and then Uwe always tells me, oh, that's not the problem. I get the feeling people don't want me to meet these people. They then set up a whole bunch of meetings.
Well, that is not so very easy, but what I do agree with, is that we have to somehow pull this picture together. We have to have, we started it once and then let it drop again, but to have the because we do get a lot of these things from the people we talk to. And that we pull that together and put it also, into the debate process. That is, in a more concrete way, rather than this overall.
But the problem for us is only.
We'll get back to this thing. I want to get back to
that we talk about the reconstruction of the American auto industry, not what we have to do here. This is what you said. At least we need a group of people who work on that. What is
No, it's not so difficult to do that. We're already doing it in the U.S., and it is the same thing as the U.S. program, because the German program depends upon the U.S. program. Without the U.S. program, there is no German program. It's not possible. So, Frank, I want to say, and see, Frank is sitting with a half-baked chicken, and it's tough to digest. The half-baked chicken is Berlin, because we took a step in the right direction in opening it up, but there's not enough cooking done to make the chicken tasty. Anyway, so his intentions are kindly, but the chicken is still complaining. If you're going to cook me, cook me all the way. Don't give me this half-baked stuff. So, in any case, the problem is what you need, the whole operation, including the machine tool operation, is all centered on Berlin. Because the feasibility of doing this means you have a funnel that you go into. The feasibility depends upon the United States. Without the United States, it couldn't happen. So there is no German program, there is no specific program that does not include the United States. Because the United States' capability, especially its political capability, is indispensable. Who is going to get the French and the British off the German back? So the point is, what you need here is think one thing. Don't think about the detail. Don't think about the detail. Don't try to get distracted. Don't get distracted in the details here and there. Look at the thing. What you need is a Berlin-centered campaign for Germany, for a mayoral campaign and a listing with a mayoral campaign in Berlin as Berlin for Germany. Period. Now you have to have a program which every German will look at, presumably, the human varieties, will look at as the flag has been raised for the defense of the nation. Now the first thing you're looking for in a campaign like this is an attitude. You want to change the attitude of the German about himself. The German now sees himself as a defeated animal. Right?
As a victim.
Yeah, the victim, the professional victim. Right. So therefore what you have to do is you have to say, there is a vision of Germany which corresponds to what you should want to think of the country. Here's a practical expression of this vision. Is the vision of Germany as a key figure in the architecture of a Eurasian economy. An economy of united, cooperating nation-states. No more globalization. A protectionist model. And you want to inspire people throughout Germany that this campaign has raised the banner of hope for them and for their grandchildren. That's what you want. That is your solution. That's the direction you have to think in. Forget all of tiddly-widdly bitty nonsense. Forget it. It doesn't account to anything. You're still stirring shit, and that is not a meal. So let's talk about a meal. Let's resolve seriously that Germany is going to have a flagship campaign. Therefore, you put more into Berlin to make the campaign a balanced campaign, and every part of Germany in your organization will benefit. You want an accelerator, you want a catalyst that changes the image of things. And people will support it from all over Germany because this is a campaign. You make it a national campaign. Don't be penny ante. You're lucky if you get pennies when you're going on penny ante. And you're begging for pennies when you should be taking a larger amounts in big chunks. And you can do it. Because look at Germany. Nobody in Germany, no political party, none of the parties in government, none of the politicians, a handful of possible likely types here and there, are doing anything. They're not worth supporting. You can't trust the country in their hands. What's your objective? Your objective is what? To save civilization. To save civilization, saving Germany is one part of it. No lesser mission is acceptable. You don't start by discussing practicalities of this and so forth. You have to deal with the realities of accounting. You have to deal with the question of balancing bills. But that's not your mission. That's one of the things you incur as a responsibility as part of your mission. That does not define your mission. Mission is changing the world. And the way to change the world in Europe is in Germany, in Berlin.
Well,
you don't have a chance.
We have an incredible vacuum because the reindustrialization issue is in this breakdown crisis the hottest potato because all the other parties are saying austerity cuts, go with the system. So we have the biggest vacuum if we don't use this, and therefore I'm really emphatic that even 1 million leaflets and pamphlets till September is penny ante or whatever. It's too small, No, because in a certain sense, if we could go in there and say we have, there are 2 million people who vote or 2.5 million people who vote, and if we could get anywhere close of the first half of the 3.5 million people in Berlin, if we could get the approximation that everybody has seen a piece of literature, we would have the same effect like we have now in Philadelphia, because the Philadelphia miracle did not come about overnight, but it was the result of years of millions of pamphlets, and that way we have completely cut through the press control, the media control, and people just, because the media is hated more and more anyway, because people are not totally stupid. So I think that we have to have a real national effort to make a breakout. We set out this campaign that we wanted to have a complete breakthrough, and a breakthrough means, that we really break through, that we get some people in the Bezirks council and some others in the Senate. Why not? Just imagine if we were, we are not very far away from it. But it only functions if there is a complete enthusiasm of saving Germany in every discussion what we do. And I know people say, we are doing this already. But this argument, we are doing it already, that is what kills the effort. Because I know people are not doing it, at least not in the way it needs to be done.
First of all, I wanted to say something to the program, because I think what you raised, what yours raised with the machine tool question again, is a perfect means to what was raised several times, also to integrate the operation in Germany, because the Berlin reindustrialization program can only function in a German reindustrialization program. Because first of all, we have two problems. First of all, every time you start discussing the Berlin question, people say, yes, but there is a competition between the regions in Germany. The people the industrial people in Munich, in Frankfurt, and elsewhere do not want to have the development of Berlin. So there is not a national approach at all. Secondly, looking at the industrial potential, Berlin is really, you have only I look now into the internet. We have 8 or 9 machine tool companies in Berlin who produce. And they're very small. Right? So as Lothar said in his article, 56% of the machine tool capacities in Germany is in Baden-Württemberg. And then something in Hessen and so forth. So what I mean is we have to integrate, we have to look at it from the German standpoint, and then define exactly what kind of reindustrialization process has to be started in, or maybe you don't call it reindustrialization in Baden-Württemberg, you call it differently. You say we have the industry, but we have to deploy them in the most intelligent way.
Wait, you have to do it in Berlin.
And what?
You have to do it in Berlin, but it won't work otherwise. Because you've got all kinds of factors involved, including political factors. What you need is not just how to reinvigorate the machine tool industry. That won't work. Machine tool industry has a surge potential, but it is not a self-starter. The self-starter is political. The self-starter is a political will to launch the large-scale projects which engage this. All right, but is that what you're talking about? Baden-Württemberg is a good argument for railways, improved railways, because what you need is an integrate. The idiots all think about localization. Probably the baby boomer generation, they don't know what a real industry is, because they're living in a post-industrial society. Look at the territory of the United States, for example, what the changes have been in the past 30 years. You have whole sections of the country. We do these studies. You see what we do. We take county by county of the United States. We do studies on every county on these factors. And you see the United States has been destroyed in the way Germany is being destroyed now by this kind of process. Now, how do you look at it? You start with the whole territory. Don't look at some territory. Don't compare one region. These regions are not self-sufficient. They're not. If they're parochial interests, that's because they're stupid. Anyone who's intelligent understands this. Anybody with industry who understands anything understands this. Some idiot gossip will tell you differently. But anyone who knows how to run an industry will not tell you that. They will say, if you have a center in Berlin, which is a coordinating center of a feeder system, of taking a national product, that is a total national product, and integrating all the components of development throughout the country as a national product, now you have a conception. Then the question is, what is the source of the capital which is going to energize this program? How do you do it? Well, you've got two aspects. You have a national program, kick the British out. Maastricht is too much. Huh? Then go to your people in Asia and Russia. You already have it with Russia. You have in the Russia and the Associated States, going with the Shanghai Cooperation Council, what that's coming to represent. You have all the political stuff which can define a product. China has a crisis. People say it's a big success, that's a lot of money. It's all crap. The Chinese have a big dollar holding. They also have a big debt to Asian countries. Huh? So forget this stuff about China's got all this money. Only children believe that nonsense. India is successful, but is not, because it has not changed the characteristic problem of India. It's improved things for some people, but not all people. Many people missing. Many missing, as the Japanese would say. So therefore you have a need right now for these countries for an integrated Eurasian development, primarily Eurasian. You have a water crisis, a global fresh water crisis. Like this thing in the southern India, one of the big water fields they tested for in the Deccan is down to quite some depths. It's fossil water from 2 million years ago. The world is depending upon fossil water resources for fresh water. Look at, you used to be able to get out of a faucet in the United States drinkable water. You can't anymore. You buy bottled water. Why do you get bottled water? Because the economy is disintegrating. The infrastructure is disintegrating. Therefore, these countries need development. They also need what's called raw materials, primary materials. Where are they going to get them? Well, primary materials are a deposit within the biosphere from dead animals and plants. And they're concentrated like those things we saw, like the potassium field piled out here. Where they were mining potassium. Why? For an area where there's a lot of potassium in a sedimentary formation. Iron you get as a sedimentary formation from living processes. You go for iron, you go for any mineral, you go for the richest lode. The world has been explored heavily to mine the richest lode. You dig deeper and deeper, and you get poorer and poorer quality of new sources of raw materials. How do you solve this? With a nuclear fission, thermonuclear fusion program. So without a high-speed development, with over 6 billion people on this planet, how do you, and many of them demanding an increase in the standard of living, how do you meet that demand when your cost of primary materials is rising because you're going to more and more marginalization without lowering the standard of living, defeating the very purpose you're trying to satisfy? That means you have to go into various forms of transmutation and processing. We do it with this so-called nanotechnology. We take cheap metal, it's not fit for shit, and we treat it a little bit, and it passes muster. As one of our friends in Italy is doing in China. Nanotechnology on junk that he's processing. Makes it work. So we're going to a point where we have to have, just to maintain the human race, we have to go now, in the next 50 years, to a two-phase, two-generation process. The first process will be founded largely on the full-scale reactivation of nuclear fission products. The next generation must be, within 50 years, we must be reaching, 25, 50 years, we must be reaching a thermonuclear fusion. Because without thermonuclear fusion and related processes, we cannot deal with this raw materials policy. We can deal with the water crisis with nuclear power. With the other problem, we're far away from it. We can reach it within a generation or so. But we have to have a mission orientation to get there. Now you have whole parts of the world that have to be developed. They have no infrastructure. You have a demand for land area that is developed for population. You don't have that land area. It doesn't exist. One of the greatest concentrations of this is in Asia. Whole parts of Asia, including the tundra region, which can be habitable. But you're going to have to develop it, buddy. And you're going to have to go there because there's raw materials underneath there. And you're going to have to go dig for them. And if you're going to dig for them, you're going to have to be there. Therefore, you have to have the habitation. So therefore, we have a clear global mission orientation in which the function of Germany and Europe in general, with respect to Eurasia as a whole, is very clearly defined. Now, the way these things happen, and I just described how I had to kick ass throughout the United States to get us where we are so far, against even most of the leadership. There's strong resistance and attempted sabotage. Is you have to have a clear vision of what your mission is for the coming generation, better 2 generations. And what you do today should be based on what you know has to happen within the coming 2 generations. Because you have to start it now, or it's not going to happen. You're going to say, well, in the future we'll do this. Oh, yeah? Are you starting it now? Then you're an asshole.
And but you don't understand when you tell people of baby boomer age, think about the next 2 generations, they say, oh, by that time the Germans have died out anyway, so I don't need them to
I don't think so. I think there's some Germans left who have breeding potential.
But I just great.
So
Just briefly, I just want to say when it's, I think the idea of, really launching this big as a national campaign is very, very important. To do it, I think we're going to have to stack. We're going to have to pull some people together who will be able to cover the thing on a day-to-day basis. There's one thing, and I speak for myself, I don't know what's going on in Berlin on a day-to-day basis until I go there. Fortunately, I go frequently, so I find out a little bit. But we have to be able, I think, to pull together a picture, and so that we know what we need, for the next step. The other thing is this vision of Berlin as the hub of Eurasian development. I think this should be the subject of a conference in Berlin, not a seminar, but a conference of the Buso campaign, sometime before September, where we would have a big, bring in a lot of people, also inviting people that we have.
we have one first big meeting on the 8th of June.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about something else, going beyond that, which is also bringing people, for example, from Russia, from China, from India, from these countries that we were talking about. And in the process of, going to this conference, obviously the program would be something to work on.
But that would already be something to talk to all of these machine tool people about, because they have their contacts, they export to these countries. That would be the way to pull it together. And also I think to focus the intelligence more on, like what they're doing in the US. I don't know if you saw the report Paul Gallagher gave, where he has an unbelievable picture, which I think we can, I know Lothar is working on that, that if you really have the attitude to save those industries which are now going bust, because we have here lost in the last, I think since the Euro is there, every year 40,000 machine tools per year. Now just imagine how much capacity that has been. In the United States, they have now this unbelievable process where they auction them on the internet. Like, on eBay, you have a machine tool, okay, you auction away the electricity, you auction away the machines, the toilets, it's unbelievable. It's like a flea market. And I think something like that is probably going on here with the hedge funds and the locusts, and I think we really have to have this sense, my God, this country is one of the most important machine tool capacities worldwide. If you look at a map where you have machine tools, there are not many countries who have that kind of a machine tool. I mean, we discussed this with the French campaign, that is one of the big differences, that France has a couple of very big firms, but you do not have this in-depth machine tool capability. But if that goes out of the window, that means the relative population density collapses by an order of magnitude right there, because this is not something which you cannot just put it back together once it's gone. And what they have seen in the United States is that, they have literally, evaporated many of these capacities already. They don't exist any longer.
But here it goes together with the private equity effect.
Yeah, sure.
And it's today again in the FAZ huge article. I mean, they say they haven't gotten yet to the big Beute that they are looking at. And they really look to those small companies. I mean, between 20, 100 people. We're in a real war. It's a
well, we have
thing against
in an approximation, we had this project to have an updated version of the productive triangle, basically covering, including this picture of the attack and the dismantling. So some pieces have been written already, others are in the pipeline. I think when we have that pamphlet or that brochure ready, we should really go with that in all-out mobilization. And I fully agree with you. We need to have back an approach to have a national campaign. I mean, that's the answer to the biotopes, Yeah.
I have a proposition more about just real quick, a quick proposition as a French person on the Mittelstand. Because once I met a guy who was French, worked in a company that was had one factory on the German side of the border, another factory on the French side of the border. And he said, I don't care how much a French company offers me a salary, I'm not leaving this firm. Why did he say that? Because he said it's so much less rigid than the French firms. We can actually talk. So I propose that we import something from the Mittelstand.
But this thing with the auto, I just want to say, because Baden-Württemberg, the problem is really with the Mittelstand Baden-Württemberg is to a large extent, as we all know, but you should realize it's linked to auto. And it is, and I mean, several people whom we talked to, they really said that by now you do not have, even like 4 or 3 years ago, there was much more of the Mittelstand capacity. But that's gone. This private equity stuff is one thing, but also, because the whole thing is shrinking as such, that more and more things are oriented towards the auto industry. And this one particular guy said that he was very worried about Daimler, because they would have a lousy internal structure and they would be the next ones to get into big trouble, apart from VW. But I think really, I mean, it's a huge chunk of the German industry, and in East Germany, it's the most important industry factor. It's the auto industry. So we do have this. We have this sword, over our heads already. Also in that connection, so that because it's, And these equity funds, they are everywhere. When you meet these guys, everybody tells you, yeah, I mean, I'm shortly before also inviting somebody because I don't get any money anymore from my bank.
I just, I think it would be important to get some closure on this, the part of the discussion we had on the Fernando question, because I think if you look at the youth movement, one reason why in Europe is of its strength, I think it's because they did not go through a certain process that happened in the old organization. And that is connected with the Fernando thing. There was, and it hasn't been brought up here, in the youth movement there's a very natural relationship between what the youth movement in the US is and what it is here. And it's not simply a relationship, it's every day, it's called, it's a sense that it's one youth movement. Now in Europe, I think we have not, one of the reasons for the certain kind of stench of impotence, which is it's systemic. It's something in the mind, deep in the mind, is actually something that we did go through in the European organization, at least to a large extent in this Fernando thing. Namely, there was a very big split in thinking between the United States and Europe. There was a period in which, and there are all kinds of reasons for it that others would be more qualified to talk about than I can. I simply wanted to point out that this happened, and I don't think we fully overcome the effects of this. There was a period, for example, I remember when these incredible atomic bomb memoranda of Lynn were coming in on the Fernando question, one after the other. I remember being very freaked out about this. I didn't quite know what was going on, but these were really heavy things. Now, around that, but actually started long before, was a drift in the sense, well, see, the U.S. is not so good because they put Lynn into jail. Or what about oral contacts in the United States? Or what about the United States itself? And then you got this thing that Fernando did in Webster and so forth. Well, the U.S. Revolution, well, this was all kinds of things. It wasn't really that great. And then it also radiated into the intelligence work very, very strongly. There was a kind of suggestion, well, see, Lynn has been manipulated by certain people, contacts in the United States who are feeding him a certain view. And this was going on even all the way to the Iraq question, right? Maybe his judgment is not so good. Right? And this became a very gnawing, I think a very, very demoralizing process. And I remember we had this thing where we're not getting the intelligence about the U.S., we have to read the U.S. newspapers here. Well, I mean, so others can say more to it, but I think it's important to have a sense that, because the organization before this happened was different. There was a demoralizing effect, which I think was very much associated with that, and it's connected with this slime mold. But I can bring it up.
I get to exactly what the problem is. Remember, you have to look at me to understand how this worked, and you have to look at the operations against us. Now, the point where I got into trouble before most of you were born. And I got into trouble when I came back from India. And I had already come on the attention of the British intelligence officer in India, because I've been involved in pro-India, pro-independence. And I had met with most of the leading political parties of India at that time. That was in 46. I had been a participant in the circumstances of the so-called Calcutta riots, which are not Calcutta, they're not riots. It was several million people. It was the biggest thing you ever saw in your life. It started like a warm summer's day. I was going up to the Maidan. You have this intersection of Dharamtala and Chowri in Calcutta. And I was walking up to the Maidan, where I usually used to meet people. And some young students I knew were there at the Maidan. It was this area, the tram area of the Maidan. I don't think it's still there. I don't know besides. But anyway, the tram area. And that's why they were there. They were meaning they were going to do a routine demonstration against the British Raj by marching up from Dharamtala along to the Governor General's house. And, just a routine demonstration. And I talked to them, they told me what they're going to do. He laughed. I said, we meet again. Well, I didn't meet them again because none of them were killed. They marked up there. It was a lousy charge, which is a bamboo piece of bamboo with a brass tip on it. And it used as a whip, used as a prod of the whip. It's very violent. You can kill people with that quite nicely. So anyway, so this evoked a protest. There was a turnout of protest in the world. And as a result of that, British police, who were the police force, lined up machine guns in the area where a protest march was coming down Darmstadt, which is the street which leads toward the Government College. And at the intersection of Charingi, which is the main prong next to the Maidan, the police had machine guns. And at close range, as the crowd marched, the British police opened up full fire with heavy machine guns. The blood was thick on the streets the day after. So, in this situation, in my activities in Calcutta, I was told by a friend of mine in the military service that I was under heavy supervision. I better watch for my life, from the British CIA. So from that point on, I was classed as a dangerous personality. This went together with something in my file which comes from earlier from me. The fact that my original discovery at about the age of 14 was the majority was crack. Which is very simple, but I believe that my whole life has been shaped by that discovery ever since. As you may have noticed in details. So anyway, so I'm a dangerous personality. Then already begin to have interesting troubles with my life. So then I become a participant in organizing defense against victims of Makati. Troubles got interesting. And at various points in my life, the same things happened. I've been classed as a dangerous personality, as I was in 1973 by the Congress of Cry for Freedom. So the point is that when in the organization, the enemy looks at me as the dangerous personality. What they always try to do is to get people to distance themselves from me personally, so they can handle it. That's the way the system works. And so what you're talking about, that's what it is. They spread the rumors. They run with them. We ran a few operations against them, and they didn't like it too much. Like the joke we came up with. That if your garbage can is empty and your dog is pregnant, the FBI. So things like that they didn't like too much. But then, especially the SDI was entirely my work, as you know. The way it happened, I just picked up on some threads and made it up. It worked.
You did a good operation in Europe on that too.
Yeah, we did. And and therefore the fear against me, especially after 1992, after in Europe, the attacks on our organization here from agencies. I got letters in prison from people like I got Gabriel Ramon. And also from the Fonda got a letter from him, and he had to break off contact because of the tremendous pressure on him. So he was targeted. Guy Lozenko was targeted. So the people we worked with were all targeted. And they were targeted. The one thing was get them away from me, because I was a dangerous personality, without which things that were unpleasant to the enemy were probably not happening. That's what we did in the organization almost.
There's one thing where it intersects something that I think is very relevant now, is the question of the Maastricht and the so-called Europe. Because the way this came out is that we have, in a lot of contexts, also hear also the people who live in Berlin sometimes. And it was an unbelievable seminar. I think we got into the briefing that I went to on making the world safe for empire. And I talked to Elke about that because we know the guy, and we know of this Hagen from Munich, who was known to this law expert, this guy from Harvard, where is very frankly the following concept was put out. You see the Bush administration. This is terrible. This is unilateral. This is and so forth. What is the alternative? That's already on the way down. So what's the alternative? And this fellow said in a very frank way and in a very reasoned way, at least superficially, the alternative is an empire of a new type. And that is Europe. In their sense, of course. And I think this is very significant. If we don't go after something, not necessarily just in words, but the question is, what is the thinking, what is the susceptibility of people, to a certain kind of sentimental idea of this Europe? Partly because of the whole argument, Nazi Germany. If you talk about Germany as a nation, that the alternative was this and so forth. But I think it's a real slime mold phenomenon. I studied also a little bit the way in which this EU process developed, because it has certain epistemological characteristics which are, I think, relevant, very relevant. If you watch the way the bureaucracy, step by step, these are the small steps of Merkel, right? This is the typical. I mean, I'm not saying that she's necessarily the same thing.
You have many features in the world.
Yeah. It's like an amoeba that is slowly eating away with the idea of eliminating the nation states, the idea of this very bureaucratic kind of thing. And what's significant of it is when they encounter some problem, like, for example, the vote against the so-called Constitution in France, it doesn't bother them. Like an amoeba, they start to work in another direction. The point is, you have an impossible system. You have a system which is axiomatically evil, which is producing one catastrophe after the other, and yet they keep going. What I think is ontologically significant about this is that in order to do something about that, you have to break it. You can't say, well, we have this problem. Well, maybe Europe, yes, there are people in Europe who think, yes, we should do something about the ECB, we should do something about this, we should do something about this. What most of this is, if not all, is exactly the way this slime mold works. It adjusts bureaucratic, it tries to integrate with the idea you protect the axiomatic structure, you protect the basic policy, but you're flexible in a bureaucratic way, and you don't permit a break with the principle. And this is extremely, I think if one does not go after that, and I noticed it's really a big pedagogical problem.
That becomes a great thing.
Yes, I noticed that.
Just to say,
But just one last point, and that correlates also with the problem is that, which we're seeing very often, is that educated people do not have a sense of what this fight around the American Constitution was. It's a very deep thing. It's not simply that it's a real epistemological problem. It's not simply they don't know and so forth. Of course, you have the anti-side, the so-called European identity, which this guy Sperling, in a certain way, very clearly expressed. What? Yeah, Rifkin. Anyway, but it's very articulated. In other words, it's really there. And if we don't go after it in an effective way, I don't think it's going to work, because if you're talking about Berlin, if you're talking about a sense of having a nation again, and you have people whose minds are in the grip of this slime mold, oligarchism, exactly.
No, just on this, just shortly, he said, we have the editorial here received an excellent article that I wrote on precisely. This is the first time it happens that I praise my article, but it's really, first of all, I did it for Germany, because I completely thoughtfully did it, to help, the campaign that had launched against the euro. So it was, and it goes precisely into the thinking groups of this master system, which is, that basically all these people now in France, is definitely the case, don't feel that they as a nation can change the world anymore, and so therefore that they have to go for this kind of integrated regional empire to be able to change the world. So that's what it goes through all the facts, and it's a completely, and reviewed the whole thing anew, and it's really quite effective. So anyhow, if you really want to break this thing, this article would be a first signal that you intend to do it. And then it's not just on the question of France, just to intervene on a couple of things, because seems to think that, he said, we're not going to be able to take this Bastille, he said, that we're trying to take in France. He said, it's a new Bastille, it's not new. It's a real Bastille. He said, and just to bring a couple of news of optimism, he said, well, because it was said that, he said the U.S. has to come and save Germany from the claws of France and Britain. He said, but there's also the French population, which is being completely oppressed, he said, by this treaty, he said, and which has shown signs, he said, in the last period of time, he said, that they want to get rid of it. He said, first of all, the treaty, he said, the vote against the constitutional treaty on the 29th of May. But also more recently, he said, we launched this campaign against the euro also very strongly. He said, and the first reactions that we got, he said, were really quite negative. He said, with most of the people clinging on to this idea of the euro. He said, but last week, in the last couple of days, we did an intersection in the main Paris streets with signboards saying the euro is dead. We need great works. The euro is killing Europe. The euro is killing Europe. We need great projects. And all of a sudden, surprise, we got tremendous success. We had people in the very large cars stopping and saying, I said it all along. This euro would kill us. Then another guy who said, lady, it's not, the euro is not only killing Europe, but there's all the entire paper is now threatened. The entire money paper is now threatened. So therefore, in the very high level of people, there was also the sentiment, kind of expressing itself in these intersections, and also then in the population was coming out much more forcefully, and so therefore in 1 hour we got more than 100 contacts.
It's a euro pissoir.
Huh?
Euro noir.
So this is one thing. So therefore there has been definitely a shift, a quite rapid shift in the population around this euro thing, which is happening, and which has to do with the prices, has to do with all the institutions coming down, and things. And in this context, the Jack campaign, just reflects, and then just to come back to the whole discussion we've been having here, and people getting defensive, and saying, we are doing within has evidence. The point is that we are in a completely new situation, where we have to see that we can really affect a major change if we get completely extremely courageous and intervening in that situation. And this is something new for all of us. It's not this is not something that was there a year ago or 2 years ago in this sense. And it's only realizing this that really can change the way we impact the situation. And it's definitely the case there in France, for instance. And Jack knows it better than all of us, but now it's happening, and we can see it all. For instance, we realized a few months ago when we told some people we had to abandon more or less the Lyon operation because we were having financial problems in Paris, and so therefore we had to go there and tell these people the context that we had there. Well, now you're going to have to organize yourselves, because we for this we have to leave right now, but you can start local yourself. And they did it, and they're still doing it. In meeting every week, and we have now a campaign going in Lyon, which is has with our help, of course, but it's more or less by itself, developing itself in one of the major, suburb, difficult suburb areas in Lyon. So that was one thing. And then we started doing the same thing in Paris, and it worked again. People would run, so we had boomers, who were basically just waiting for us to ask them. And then we have this whole development recently now in Nancy, where two people whom we know for maybe a year, or one of them a year or two, the other one from a longer time, decided to set up also a boomer operation there. And out of this, we built up this conference with the youth, where we had a major breakthrough in terms of the media. It's obviously not the media. It's obviously that some network there has moved to use Jack's campaign as a tool to really to at least send a strong political message to Paris. And because we all of a sudden got major coverage in what is one of the major papers region-wide in the other local paper and in different media. So we have like a kind of generally Jacques' campaign, even though we are in this police state, it's completely overblown. But at the same time, there are also networks which are willing to move this. And Jacques' campaign this time in a sense, is better than the one we had in 1995. Because first of all, we have the internet with many interviews of Jacques circulating, and we having an impact on this internet. Then he's been invited already for one national TV, this Post Gakpo has invited him for a program. He's being now invited once again by the main African radio, which has which reaches out to 10 million people in Francophone Africa, but also in Paris. So there's so we're not getting a sense. There will be very nasty operations against us, and the police state is somehow still there. But we get more a sense of something which is coming down, and that we can impact if we intervene. And there, that's the problem that we have, because we're small forces, and there's a big potential. But that means that we have to absolutely, all of us, the youth and the older people, make a very, very, determined intervention in this situation. But it's not. I don't see it at all at this point as something as a hopeless situation, or something so difficult that we could not somehow affect this if we work together.
Well, the situation is not so hopeless. You can always deal with France if you torture them. They say, well, at least you're not ignoring me. Ignoring me. At least you care. You care enough to torture me. It's called the true love of the flick.
No, also we have several things we can do. We have a group of people who is extremely also the situation who wants to try to break this.
And the key thing is focus on what I said. I mean, you need here a concept of a Berlin campaign and a Berlin campaign for Germany. You need to change the way in which you merchandise the organization by giving it a European-wide significance and German-wide significance. You've got to find some spot. It's like choosing a place of battle. You have to find a choice of battlefield on which you're going to fight the war, because you can't make every area a front. So pick your battlefield. The best battlefield is Berlin. Right? Now why? Because you have two things. You have Berlin is not far from Saxony. You have two youth groups which can grow under these circumstances, and therefore you will have a mass base, because the only thing that attracts people is youth. Politically, that's all it works. So you have a youth base, which means that you can maintain a high density of impact in the key city in Germany. Your program is thematic, and the benefits are radiated in every part of Germany. So sometimes you hit a flank. By hitting a flank, you hit the whole target, and the whole target is Germany. Take any part of Germany, take the Berlin flank, and build it up now. And back it up. You will find you'll get money from doing so more efficiently, and every part of the organization will benefit. Instead of trying to say you have a bunch of little clones out there distributed around the landscape, and they will all each follow this program and have their own quota, and that'll work. It won't work. Don't kid yourself. It's death. It's the way to die. It's like old age setting in and you're preparing to die. Don't do it. Get back to an integrated organization with a national focus and run it on assignment. Don't be mechanistic. Just don't be mechanistic. That's what will kill you. But you need to strengthen. You need to repress impact in Berlin. See, you don't lose anything. We got telephone lines. We have communications. We have internet communication. We don't have any problem about communication. You don't have to be rubbing your nose next to someone to communicate.
But then what are you really proposing then? I mean, in terms you said that Rainer would be good to go there. I mean, what
I think what you need, just to need enough initial strength so you can use it as a national campaign center. The problem is overstressed now. And the load of doing it in a place as high cost as Berlin is such that you've got to be very serious about having a above break-even level. Right now, you've got an operation which is operating below break-even level, and that's not good for anybody. So therefore, you have to have it built. So if it's above break-even, and you don't have rage storming through the area because it's below break-even among the boomers, then you won't alienate the youth by throwing fits of rage all the time. Therefore, they'll be much happier. They're much happier with the environment when they're not doing the same thing. So therefore, you have to have a fair shake for the thing to work. And you have a lot of things to do. You have government facilities, institutional facilities to cover, you've got the diplomatic business to cover, all these things. And you have to have them deployment. You have to have an intelligence capability.
Lynn, I have a question and wanted to bring something up in a certain sense that Jonathan just brought up also with regards to the paper you wrote today about the situation with the World Cup in Berlin. And because with regard to that paper, and with regard to what Jonathan just brought up, I think to some extent the question with the campaign in Berlin, you once told us on a phone call, a couple of people, that even though people would perhaps not like it, the voters, they would believe us in telling them that what we do in the United States, what you represent in the United States, is the key to changing the situation also for Germany.
Yep.
And I came to discover that sometimes that can also be the case, that even people in our own organization perhaps sometimes don't like that.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes,
chauvinism.
In a certain sense, is Lynn right when he says this?
Of course I'm right.
Right? I didn't doubt it. But I mean, because we ran into this with the youth movement, with the idea of producing a pamphlet which would be the cities of the paper, and this was considered not to be programmatic.
Of course it's programmatic.
Yeah, of course. But the thing is, this is what Jonathan brought up, I think we have to reflect on, because all of the discussion that we have here will center on that question.
Yeah, the key thing is what people think.
You know, this is what people think. The youth movement.
Yeah, you want people to think. So force them to think. Force them to think conceptually. Don't try to write propaganda pieces. Force them to think. The way they now think is a loser. Don't try to appeal to what you say is the way they think. Forget it. The way they think was doing nothing for them. Give them a new way to think. Now, for example, let's take...
Maybe we make a pause now and then we continue afterwards.
We got to feed these guys.
The food is outside.
What's it doing outside? Why is it in here where the people are? You having fun? You're being recorded into the thing.